Call to order the planning commission meeting on January 18th, 2023. Can I get roll call, please?
Commissioner Grott,
Here.
Commissioner Pickett,
Here.
Commissioner George,
Yep.
Commissioner Kinsley, and Commissioner Hall are absent.
And can get anybody to approve the agenda.
Surely, I will.
Got a first?
We got a quorum, I guess, right?
Yep.
But we're not gonna decide anything.
No
tonight.
decision.
So,
Do we need to do approval of the minutes then, or are we gonna hold that off for our regular meeting?
There's no minutes to be approved
Because
today.
our previous meeting was continued, so.
That's right, okay. So, old business, this will be a work session for discussion of review of the following proposed ordinances. Ordinance 309, an ordinance adopting text amendments to Lowell's Development Code and text amendments to the Lowell's Comprehensive Plan codifying the Lowell Downtown Master Plan. So we'll just start with that one in a second. Just kind of
Sure.
go over and lead us through this.
Yeah, I'd love to sort of propose a kind of structure for our conversation tonight. And I think essentially that's based on my understanding of how we kind of framed the need and what we wanted to accomplish in our last meeting. So would
I'm sorry to interrupt for a minute, taking purposes, would you mind stating? your
Oh,
name?
you betcha, yeah. Jacob Collister with the Lane Council of Governments.
Thank you.
Yep. So what I did tonight, I started the day thinking, well, they have all the stuff, so I don't need to print things. And then I started looking at it and I was like, I know on its face, the idea of more papers might not seem helpful, but I guess in my mind, the idea I had was that you may have taken notes. So obviously you'll have your resources, but maybe you can kind of set them to the side. What I did print up is a copy of both the development code and the comprehensive plan, and the value add here, the distinction is that I printed only pages where changes are proposed. So something like the comprehensive plan turns into a 19-page document as opposed to a many more page document. So again, the purpose is to kind of facilitate focus. The stated objective, as I heard it at our last meeting, was we need more time to become familiar with the changes that are being proposed. So in an effort to help us focus on that, I have presented something for you that is only pages that are proposed with proposed changes. And so what that means is that we can literally go page by page. I can sort of narrate the changes that you'll see on each page, and you can stop and let me know where you had notes and you had questions. But there'd be no point where we say skip now 20 pages. It would just be one page after the other. The page numbers remain the same. And so
So you wanna go through this? I would go through this.
yeah, we'll go through.
All
The
right.
plan for now is, this is something I sent out pretty shortly after our last meeting. And the idea was to again, at the request of the Planning Commission, was please give us an assignment for what it is we're gonna be looking at. So that we can kind of review and come prepared to look at those things, and it gives us a little bit of structure for our meetings. The table that you see here is not intended to be a comprehensive list of all the changes, but it was kind of the key things. And so it was intended to be a help for your review, so that, for example, when you saw, what is it, 12 some odd 15 pages of red that update the application types, you would be more than welcome to read through those, but you would also know that what that is essentially introducing this procedural provision, which replaces quite a bit. So then there's also parts of the code where there's lots of red, which strikes out the original procedure. Not a lot of procedure fundamentally is changing, but it's been organized differently, put into type, so I can talk about that a little bit, but that's one example. Then these other sections are just kind of pointing out particularly large chunks of red in this document, right? There's one thing that came and said, look at all this red. There's quite a few of these chunks of red that have a pretty straightforward explanation. And so if nothing else, you could take fairly big sections of this and say, this section right here is X, and here are the kind of key changes that are nested inside of those. And so let's talk about those, and then we can sort of move beyond that page. So I think one of the things that we should be somewhat clear about procedurally is that we have we're in a continued public hearing. We've opened up a public hearing on these items. So this work session, ideally, procedurally speaking, does not emerge with a big list of proposed changes. Procedurally, that's not what comes out of this. It provides each of you with a really good opportunity in, say, deliberations to say, I've now looked at this really closely, and here are the thoughts that I have about these sections, right? So we're discussing, we're trying to clarify what the proposal means, but it's not a work session to change a bunch of stuff and come back to a notice hearing with a bunch of new stuff. That makes sense. So there's still an opportunity to express your thoughts about something and propose something different, but that would happen in the deliberation setting.
In the continuation.
In the continuation
Yep.
of the hearing, and then in your recommendation to the council.
Real quick, also before we start, when was the last time the development code was updated?
Previous to this,
Yes.
I don't know.
I believe it was in the early 2000s.
2004, 2005. I think it's 2005.
So we're looking at almost 20 years gone by without an update. That was just something I wanted us to also see. That's one of the reasons why it's also so thick. It's because over the last 20 years, we haven't been necessarily keeping up on our updates, and now it's hitting us. So.
Yeah, there were a couple of things.
Comprehensive plan was 2005. I don't know about the developmental code because there was updates to the developmental code that was adopted in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
but it's
4
still-
years ago.
And there could have been surgical updates that have happened.
Yeah.
Something on this scale is pretty unusual or pretty doesn't happen on a regular basis, right? So what I was going to propose as a means to go through this was just to go page by page so that we really feel collectively that we've gone through it. And we can move it at a clip, or we can pause and we can discuss the detail. I think there'll be some sections that will lend themselves to being more, we've got the idea about what's happening there, and others, it could be even one word that is like, we need to talk about this one word that's changing. So are folks okay with that proposal? And we can, well, it is your meeting, so I feel charged with trying to get through as much of it as we can get through.
Well, let's just go through this and take a look at
You
it.
want to start with the comp plan?
And yeah.
Okay, so the backside of this is the comp plan stuff, and we can just take it page by page. And so page 17.
Am I looking at the right thing? This,
That's right.
all right.
Page 17, under section 9918, reference associated document. This is really just like a housekeeping thing. The city developed a parks master plan and developed and adopted the downtown master plan and a water master plan. So this is housekeeping. This is, we have an opportunity right now to provide a housekeeping update to the comprehensive plan. And when I use the term housekeeping is like, Bill, you mentioned that, this thing is really old. It is really old. A housekeeping update to a comp plan would be something like, we've proceeded with some concepts. They have to be consistent with our comprehensive plan. So we have to make strategic changes to the comprehensive plan. I call those sort of surgical housekeeping items to make sure the comprehensive plan is what prevails. And the development code implements the comprehensive plan. Something that you described earlier was kind of like, wouldn't it be great if we just overhauled this comprehensive plan? It's been 15 years, and that's something that communities do. They usually seek some kind of funding support, or it's a pretty big deal to overhaul your comprehensive plan. That's not what this project's doing. This project is taking the changes and incorporating them into the comprehensive plan and make sure that the changes are consistent. So this housekeeping item is just adding those documents to the list of associated documents. Okay. So any questions about that? These are documents that were adopted, and now we're just referencing them in the comp plan.
I want to address your table here on the next page. I guess it's
TC 46.
TC 46. And the table of projected housing distribution by type.
First off, I would say this is more your table than it's my table, because this is your
Yeah.
comprehensive plan.
It is,
Yeah.
but in order to figure out the rest of it, I would say this needs to be updated to current figures. And those current figures are available from the 2020 census. And somewhere,
But
and we need to, all of these figures will change once we know what happened in the last 10 years. So it's hard for me to look at something that's so outdated and then make decisions. And at the bottom of this page, it says Lowell single family residential R1 has a minimum lot size of 550 or 5,500.
That's the proposal.
And down from 7,000. Why did we do that?
That's the proposal.
What?
that's
So-
what we're voting.
Say again?
That's what we're voting.
Okay,
This is a proposal, so none of this is law, none of this is ordinance, none of this has been passed. This is the.
okay, when do we get a chance to change that or talk about that or
We can
whatever?
discuss
You know,
it.
I started to say to you that if you're a developer and you buy a piece of land and you find out that when you bought it or whatever, the lot size is 7,000. And you made a statement at the last meeting. Well, the developer can make the lots as big as he can, or whatever he wants to do, it's okay.
Yeah.
But the minimum lot size is 5,500.
Yeah.
Now, as a developer, you paid a certain amount of money for this acreage, and you find out you can put more lots on it at 5,500 than you can at 7,000. What do you think you're gonna do?
Yeah, I mean, the reason the change is in place is so that they'll do that. I mean, we want to realize.
Okay, so now if you do that, now we're the same as all the other cities. And I really think that's a sales point for Lowell to stay at 7,000, because people. I built some houses and as the houses that were built up there off of Moss. As soon as they platted the lots, they were sold. And it's because they were big lots to the people who are coming out of Eugene, where the lot size could be at 4,000 or 5,000 or your neighbors, you can see what they're having for dinner, it's.
So are you suggesting the market would support 5,500?
No, certainly it would, but it would support more and make it a more livable, in my mind, a better community to be around it, and more people would be attracted to it if it was 7,000. And case in point, I bought a piece of property that was already okay for small lots, and we're gonna put double wide mobile homes on them. And I was going to rent the land for 99 years, and the bank would support the people bringing their house in and putting it on the lot and paying me rent, kind of like a mobile home community in it, as it were. And as soon as I bought it, I went to the bank and I said, "Are you guys doing this?" And they said, "Well, we used to, but we're not doing it anymore." And to recreate that land that was already plumbed for these small lots. I did get a special, I went to City Hall and talked to people, because there was some of it I could not change. Because of where the fence line was and where the street was already in. And those lots, I just couldn't do anything, and they were like 5,000, 5,500 foot lots, 5,200, somewhere in that. And the only thing I could put on them was 2-story houses. To get any kind of. That was it, and there was no yard space, and to get the setbacks and everything, that's all I could do. So on the other side, I had about quite a few lots, which Kenny bought a couple of them off me, but I had to change all that plumbing to make them 7,000 foot lots, and they all sold, but I went through a lot of trouble to make that work and money. And
So I think I guess to address what I heard is one of your key points was it's sort of like a marketing, trying to market the community of Lowell. Where this is really nested in is a discrete request from the city to investigate lot size, lowering lot size, reducing minimum lot size. But also the comprehensive plan policies that you have in place, which are about addressing pretty discreetly more accommodation for more affordable housing, more accommodation for different types of housing. So I think, I guess to kind of get back to the purpose of this meeting is,
sure,
I think it's going to be less about convincing one another that the other's correct.
well,
This is the proposal that's been presented.
okay,
That we have a continuation for our hearing on. It's going to go back to that group. I think what we're focusing on today is just like, do I understand the proposal correctly, or am I confused about what you're proposing? The proposal here, you're going to see more detail about this. This is actually a very specific fix in the comp plan to say, well, we can't propose in the development code 5,500 square feet if we have 7,000 square feet of comp plan. So that's all that this is saying. This would have to change if this is going to change. And so what I'm hearing from you, Mr. George, is that you're going to make it clear,
yeah,
short of a change of opinion, that you don't think that that's right. But I don't think in this venue we're going to be able to hash
Well,
out like
what I would like to know is what was the reason for changing that?
I started it,
You started,
I did.
and because,
So, because in the planning commission here recently, we've had a lot of people having to come in for variances because they had they had over 7,000, but they were trying to subdivide their property so they could put another house in, sell part of their property.
right,
And so that was always coming in as a variance because our code says they have to be 7,000 square feet. So they were coming in saying, hey, can I get this one at 5,500 square feet? Can I get this one at 6,000 square feet? So we started seeing a lot of those. And so it raised the question, do we need to look at changing our lot sizes? So that's how it came about.
okay,
It wasn't done as a, hey, we need to do this so we can have all this. It was done because we started seeing so many variances coming in
how many,
for smaller lots. I think we had like 3 or 4 in 1 year.
that's
mean-
really not, that's some
But
way
for
to make
Lowell-
decisions.
But for Lowell, it started seeming like a lot. And it was like, should we look at this and see if we need to address the lot sizes? So that's how it all got started.
And I think oh yeah.
I'm going back to this table that Bill pointed out, saying, and I'm just asking for clarification. The 2000 to 2025 information, is that up to date? In the middle of the table?
There's
Is
a
that-
substantial amount of information in the comp plan that's not up to date, right? And
That's what I was asking about this one table, is this actual numbers?
No, it's not up to date.
Okay, so this was a projection
that was
on
a
the
projection.
2000 to 2005.
That's right.
Okay,
And this is very old.
okay. I was just curious.
And I think to get back to what you're saying, we had to have a different session to address that table. That's not something that they were tasked with.
Okay.
In this event that we're doing
But,
now,
but are we looking at this table to make decisions on the rest of it?
and that's.
No, that didn't inform the code update decisions in this case. That
So
wasn't
this table doesn't make a bit of difference?
This table does not inform the code updates and the plan updates that you see, that's right. So that was not a discrete, explicit task. So I understand what you're saying, boy, we should, anytime we make any decision, we should just cast the widest net we can, and we should get all the comprehensive plan up to date. That doesn't mean that there isn't, frankly, for practical purposes, you can step into principles and implement the comp plan policies without providing an overhaul of, I can see how what you're saying is that anecdotally speaking, there's a data point that could provide some insight relative to, say, lot size as a demand question, where you say, well, we're gonna have to extend our UGB if we don't, based on this forecast, if we don't think differently about how we're using our current land. The lens for this effort was not about land availability. The effort was really led by needs. So a number of data points. One was implementing the comprehensive plan, which says the city shall, right? These are policies. So it's like we change the policies or we look to them when we're doing a project like this. That the policies really have a substantial weight, right? Like the council and the commission really need to give deference to comp plan policies because they're this vetted, adopted ordinance that says it's sort of like the Constitution of Lowell. And so for us, our obligation as staff is when we're writing findings of fact, we have to say what we proposed is consistent. And so that's what we look to. And those policies, which we can pull those back out again, but there's quite a few that are pretty specific about looking to reduce lot sizes, to create more opportunities for a range of housing opportunities. And essentially, I thought Mia's thoughts the other night were pretty compelling. This idea that it's not necessarily about, it's about creating opportunities for families, for keeping a school in place, for housing the people who work in the community in your kind of standard, blue collar or middle class sort of family. So that's what those are in place about. The trend in the region is following that. And so the number itself, I guess, ultimately is a fairly round number that is less than 7,000. The original proposal from the code committee was 4,500, which took me by surprise. And what we heard from the community was 4,500 is going to be very challenging. And it, well, flipped the other way, I would say. It took Lowell from having the highest minimum lot size to having the lowest minimum lot size. And like maybe we need to swing the dial back. So once again, I mean, we can spend 2 hours probably talking about the philosophy around this, but this is the proposal that's going to go. And this isn't the decision, but this is the proposal that stands, that will return in February to readdress. So our purpose here is to just make sure that folks understand what they're seeing as changes, not necessarily. Can you see?
And we can make those changes in that meeting. We can say, we recommend this as long as it meets this, and we can say we want lot size to stay the same, or whatever the case is, we can make those suggestions at that time as part of the motion. If it's something that we want to change. So everything in red is not there yet. It's
the first meeting, when all this came up, we were ready to vote on accepting it.
Mhm.
And,
recommending.
and so,
recommending.
and reading all this, I'm not sure we're ready to go to an accepting it vote. Is there some kind of a time limit?
Yeah, the funds,
Huh?
the funds that's paying for it.
The funds that are paying for it?
The work that LCOG has done on this to supplement the development of this
Yeah.
is paid for by a state grant by the Transportation Growth Management.
Okay.
Program. that lapses at the end of March.
March 15th.
and they won't give us an extension?
I asked that in the last meeting, Bill, and they said they strongly recommend that we don't ask for an extension, even though we had, what, a year and a half of COVID.
Well, yeah, we paused for a year and a half for COVID. So I think that's really why.
And so-
we pretty much stopped. the
And
project.
they're not gonna pay for it unless we approve what you've put together here?
No.
I mean, they paid for what's happened up to this point, so going forward.
Going forward, it's out of our pocket.
Okay,
And again, I mean, you're back onto a decision-making body, so you're immersing in this as a fresh thing. I think Lon, or excuse me, Chair Trot, mentioned last time that he doesn't have the same concerns because he's been with the project for 2+ years.
yes, and thank you for doing that. As I've been around it for a while myself, and on the planning commission some time ago, then the council, finally mayor. And so I put a lot of time into the city as well, and I know what you've gone through. I honestly didn't know what was going on the last couple of years, and I guess Mary quit and or asked to resign, probably got a little much for her, and I think Suzanne's been here with you as well for those 2 years.
Couple of years.
Yeah.
A year.
And
So we're a quarter of the way through our time and we've gotten through the first couple pages. I do think from what I remember, a key issue was the 55 was the lot size. So we sort of dove headfirst into that. That's the proposal that stands right now.
so I'm looking at TC 50.
Yep.
And you have some red on it that's been scratched out.
Yep, that means that this is a proposed removal.
It was proposed and you removed it?
Now, this is proposed to be removed. So number 10 is proposed to be removed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So,
that comes up in the development code too, from the state level,
That's right.
right?
So that's
Cannot put restrictions on mobile homes that we're not gonna put on stick shift.
So that's law. That's law
Yeah,
that
so-
we're just holding in.
Removing this complies with state. And with the developmental code.
Yeah, so I call that housekeeping, meaning it's not really frankly related to our project outside of the fact that.
and all the rest of it's in black is from
It's
the
just
old
how
code.
it is, and it's how it's gonna be going forward, or at least
Okay.
it's not proposed to change. So then you can see on 9.951 on TC 51 here, this is introducing land use district types. And so the new district type that's being proposed here is all the downtown districts. So it's introducing a category of districts. And our downtown master plan essentially added this nuance for the downtown area for flex use 1, flex use 2, the downtown residential. Anything that has that downtown qualifier. This is just introducing that as a category. And so it's sort of structural as opposed to, it doesn't introduce a regulation or anything.
I got a quick question, and this is under section 9.234. And it's D, and it's not on that, it's on this
Full plan,
this big plan.
which page?
And it says the land divider shall provide and designate 1 foot reverse strips across the ends of the stub street. I'm not,
So you just jump to the development code, is that what you're?
yeah, well, it's a code we're gonna,
We are gonna look at this, but I was hoping to do it sort of page by page. so we
okay,
don't jump
I just don't
into it.
understand that.
But we are gonna touch on, the idea here is to touch on every change that's in here. So we would literally look at that, call that out. to anybody
Well,
else.
I think that actually is something that's on the old code. It's not,
Oh, it's not in
it's
red.
not in red.
Well, then,
It's just something I don't understand. And
okay, I don't, I mean, if we wanna prioritize that, we can.
Well, no, it's. I've
But
seen
as
it in
far as
there.
trying to get through, our aim is to try to make sure we,
Mr. Chairman, we've got, what, 2 hours set aside? Is that what we're set aside? 2 hours, we're a quarter of the way through. We've got to get through everything on here. I would really like for Jake to go page by page down this list, explain what the red is, ask any questions and keep moving, please. Really got to keep moving on this if we want to get through it all.
Okay, so TC 52 is. We just saw how we're introducing a category of districts. TC 52 is essentially outlining, not essentially, it is outlining the actual districts that fall within that category. So it starts with the high level categories and then it introduces the specific categories. So again, this is a structural adjustment to show in the comprehensive plan the types of districts that are in Lowell.
I'm gonna pull, question on this.
Yep.
In the developmental code. I'm not gonna go to the developmental code, but it mentions that we're retaining C1, commercial, general commercial district. And that the city requested to keep it.
Yeah.
I don't see C1 anywhere in the map.
Yep, and the reason is C1 is anticipated to be a zone of potential future utility, right? So you can have zones in your code that don't actually manifest. So if your comprehensive plan said this isn't exactly how this is set up, but it could say we want to anticipate different types of uses. We don't actually have any physical area where that's going to realize, but if we have a downtown master plan that has a fixed boundary and something is proposed for commercial on the fringe at some point in future time, then you have
we
a
could
district.
adopt it.
Yeah.
And
So that
set
passes
to
through
that or change the, okay.
Yep, so that passes through the zone change process and it goes through the whole process, but you have something in place.
It
And
allows it
if,
to do that.
if there was like downtown commercial, we're like, well, we have downtown
Flex.
zones. But general commercial is like, that could be anywhere in the city. You know, technically speaking. All right, page 54.
Maybe this is wrong, but I'm back here on the downtown flex use 1
Yeah.
and downtown flex use 2. There's quite a lot about it in this.
We'll
As
talk
far
about
as, one thing that I saw is 18-inch porches from the cement for housing, but not for businesses. So what's the idea of the 18-inch?
So we'll talk about that when we get into the development code, because there's,
And that's not here?
No, this is literally just putting the stuff in our comp
Yeah.
plan says that you can have these items.
the comprehensive plan is very much a sort of organizing document that essentially enables and empowers the developer. The detail of almost everything when it comes to implementation is in the development code. So my hope was that with the comp plan, we'll probably get through the comp plan pretty quick, because it's just like, yeah, we need to update the comp plan to show these things. The detail that you're talking about is gonna be when we get in there to the development code.
Well, it's on the table there of how to build a city and housing, and it also says R1, which is residential.
Yep.
Same thing.
Yep.
And okay,
So-
as long as we get
This
to
is
that,
this is like the appendix. It says, hey, this is what we can do in town. In order to know what this means, go to this. So this is, he's just showing us the changes that are in here that are reflected from this. It's literally just gonna be, these are the changes that we put in the comp plan. Okay, now let's go deeper into all of the red in here, and that's the depthness inside this.
So I do have one more question on this.
Okay.
The table that is cut off, which would be on TC 53,
Okay,
the table 9.950B, land use summary. And it's referencing R1, R3, C1, C2, I1, PL. And instead of these items, we're retaining C1, but now we're using downtown flex, downtown 1, 2, downtown residential, attached, detached, and public lands. So why wouldn't we be updating the tables to reflect the same information in the next line?
that is a compelling question related to the fact that you now have something that is I would say that the comp plan is going to have those narratives become outdated within a couple of years, right? Comp plan is something that has a lifespan that is, more time than that, let's say. So I think what you're pointing to is the fact that, yeah, okay, we have outdated tables, but now we have a reference to a zone that doesn't even exist. I think the answer to that is probably not super satisfying, but it's like the table is out of date currently. And so this renders it sort of not significantly more out of date or irrelevant, if that makes sense, right?
Sure.
We have an irrelevant table.
Right.
It's sort of out of the gate, it's like, this data is way old, it's not relevant. I can see how someone looking at this says, I'm looking for C1, I don't even see C1. So it becomes part of a housekeeping item. Again, the scope of this isn't to go back and ripple through every table and create tables so that there's continuity. And it's a very typical planning conundrum, right? You update this thing, now these things aren't. Then you go update those things, now it's not consistent with this one. So you're constantly trying to bring things into alignment. So I think what I would say is that the table's irrelevant, it's out of date. The fact that we're changing the abbreviations of some new zoning districts renders it just that much less irrelevant. So it's not a super satisfying
No, it's
answer.
not.
But it's really not the scope of the project to overhaul the comprehensive plan.
Right. And that comes back to this discussion is actually on the red in the book.
I get that. But
Okay.
I want
And
to ask
I-
that question because it.
No, I
that
understand.
references
I
the
just-
table.
I think,
And when you look at the table, you're going, wait a minute.
I understand, I'm just thinking, in order for us to get through this.
Through this, we need to stay on the
we
red,
need
I
to- we
understand
need to
that.
Stay on the red, otherwise.
If I don't ask those questions, then I forget.
And coming
I
back
think
to
it's
what
a
we're
good
using, Bill's thing is, I think that's something else maybe we need to look at for a different work session, just to be able to go through our comp plan and say, this isn't making sense, we need to write those things aside and get fixed. But I think that needs to be on a separate night tonight.
So 54 does provide some narration to sort of the historical update that occurs there. So in some, again, probably still unsatisfying way, there is a bit of like, why am I seeing C2 in the table? And then there's some explanation of the fact that C2 was removed as a zoning district. Not perfect, but it's a reference to enable a development code update that isn't objectively and obviously inconsistent with the comp plan. So that's essentially what we're trying to do here. Any questions about 54? 54 is just another instance where we're introducing essentially the downtown master plans districts in name, nominally. We're not outlining what they mean exactly or how they're applied. That's the development code's role. The water system, the water master plan was updated, so 67 is a reference to that. It's calling out the new adopted master plan from 2022. Then you're going to see quite a bit of red on 71 and 72. These are,
You know, I guess I'm slow. It says that the water system is going to be updated. But where is in this plan what the update actually is?
so the water master plan is an independent document. It's a refinement plan to the comprehensive plan.
Right? I know that there's a water plan in here,
Okay,
but we're just kind of glossed. This is a new water plan.
well, it was adopted. That's a housekeeping thing. That we don't have anything to do with the water master plan itself. That was a document that was adopted
Okay,
independent of this project.
all right. So
So
we're
we're
not,
using this update to catch that part of it.
Notify that it's here.
okay. So, but if we. All right.
So the Parks Master Plan is the exact same thing. Park Master Plan was an independent process, wasn't our project at all. When it was completed, they said, hey, when you do your downtown master plan update, use that as the opportunity to bring the Parks Master Plan formally into.
Right, and that's in the, we're voting on that. Because it's part of this plan, right? We're voting on an overall,
So it's already been voted on. We're only voting on putting that information that it was adopted, it's already been adopted into the comprehensive plan.
right,
So that they just, so it's a reference point saying, hey,
but it says right here that we're adopting that, right? In the red,
No, we're adopting reference to it. The document itself has been adopted. It was adopted a couple years ago. What we did do, and this is actually quite relevant, is on page 78, so if you turn the next page over, the policies that were adopted as part of that parks plan are added to the Parks and Recreation policy.
is this one where all the lines are through it?
Not through it, so 78.
I'm on 71.
Come up to 78, which is the next page over.
so I think real quick, so 71 and 72 is the old code. The old reference that we're striking because there was a new one adopted.
Okay,
So now we're over at 78 with the new code being added.
There was a point in time where the Parks Master Plan was essentially these few pages.
okay,
The Parks Master Plan was developed, which is numerous pages, lots of detail, strategies, plans, and policies. This now references that plan. It says for that information, go to the Parks Master Plan. But the policies that are housed in the comprehensive plan around Parks and Recreation are now added. So that came from the. Parks
okay,
Master
so this is
Plan.
like 10 through 16,
That's right.
okay,
Those are now new policies that were called out in the Parks Master Plan.
And just to clarify, Parks Master Plan includes the green that's in this.
It definitely speaks to the park that exists, but it would also speak to the possibility of that. Of the parks. All right, so 88. The next page over, this is policy 9 that says off-street parking shall be provided by all land uses to improve traffic flow, promote safety and lessen site obstruction along the street. The proposal that is coming before the planning commission has nuance that it introduces related to this. Suggesting that within the downtown zone, off-street parking is not a requirement. And so that's why this is struck. So that's why you see that. So anyone who has a concern about off-street parking changes would say, I have a concern about number 9. And again, the detail about that is here in the development code, that's making reference to that. Okay, more nuance related to providing a reference to the new districts that are in downtown. So there are new residential districts that are introduced with the proposal, and so these are added in here. You can see it at the bottom of 102, C2 is being removed.
okay. And that's because of the DX code, 1 or 2.
Okay. So same thing with 3, the flex uses are introduced in more detail here.
Okay,
Let's see, it looks like there's just like a grammatical change there. Under industrial. Then public land downtown was established as a distinct use too, because there's a lot of public lands downtown and it's been the downtown master plan. Functionally, it doesn't change much at all from how it was historically, but it's here to distinguish between the public land that's in downtown and the public lands that aren't downtown. Uh, 111. This is a reference to, so the comprehensive plan maps index essentially keeps track of the most current versions of maps. So this would call out a change If this is adopted, then you call out the change to the newest zoning map and the regulating map, which is at the back of the development, or sorry, the back of the comp. At the back of the comprehensive plan.
This guy here.
Yeah. Which brings us to the last change to the narrative, to the text, which is calling out the regulating plan map. So it provides some context for the map that follows, which is the regulating plan that emerged from the downtown master plan. So I think the theme that you find in the comprehensive plan and Chair Groff really drove this home was that the comprehensive plan is kind of two things. One, there are some policies that have to be adjusted to accommodate changes in the development code, but really just a few. Most of it is housekeeping to make sure references in here in the text at least are consistent with the development code proposal. So these, I would say the comprehensive plan map, it really leads, it follows on the development code changes. So most of what we talked about here, we're going to talk about in more detail here. That's one way to characterize it. Okay, so can we set aside the comprehensive plan changes? For now, at least.
You good, George?
Sorry. Yeah,
I think a lot of your questions are in the development code, so that's what we're gonna start now.
yeah, they are.
Yeah.
And I appreciate what this is all about. I'm looking at it and it's all. I've never done anything like this.
What I kind of see this as is you as a developer come in and say, "Hey, I want to develop a goal."
Yeah,
You're gonna go to the comprehensive plan, okay, they have anything on these items
well,
that you wanna put in?
and I ran into that.
Right.
With this exact code. Cause I had certain parameters and things to answer to, and I wondered where that came from, because it was a code that I've never actually seen before. But, I'm looking at some of the changes that I see in this, and I'm thinking, I don't wanna go there.
And I think
And I,
what we would hope is that, and I think one of the aims was, and I think it was the aim, or at least the primary aim, was. I think having thoughts like, I don't like this, or I don't want to do this, that's frankly what should emerge from this. The concern we want to address is, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's even being proposed in here. We're trying to address that to the best we can for, particularly for the newer commissioners who haven't kind of been along the ride, to be like, okay, we can give some context, where we're able to do that pretty efficiently. But mostly it's just like, let's talk about what the proposed changes are. And then you do your bullet list of like, I don't like that, and I don't like this. But this isn't gonna be a venue for kind of hashing that out so much.
Yeah, we have to do that after that.
yeah, what I wanted, I didn't know where we're gonna go. And, so I sat over on the coast 2 days reading this thing. And this is the questions that I have, that I saw that, yeah, that just doesn't look right. And maybe it's been in print all this
Let's
time.
make sure that you understand what the proposed change is. So I think that's part of this.
Right.
This is the change. I don't understand what you're proposing versus why in the world would we do this, or why is this happening? That's something that we won't have time to do that, I think, for every one of these things.
Well, really, I wonder, do we have the right information to even make the changes that you have made?
I mean,
Because those changes have to do with what's gonna happen in the future. And the only way we can figure that out is to kind of look at the last 10 years and see what actually happened around here.
Let's just start through this.
Yeah, I
and
don't,
come to that.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, I'm a planner. We do a lot of forecasting, so I
Well,
don't validate fundamentally what you're saying, but the approach that we're taking is not unusual, it's not viewed
But it-
generally as
but-
reckless, we're not undertaking the sort of analysis that you're describing, which would pursue, like, we wouldn't ever say, we've got to expand the UGB because we think that we need to do that.
I'm sorry,
We would never expand a UGB just because it's like, it just seems like the thing to do. The comp plan said we should probably do that. We would back that up with analysis. We're trying to create some kind of a context for understanding the reasoning behind a reduction of lot size, for example. But it's not a comprehensive planning process. So what I think we should continue doing is walk through these, have you share your specific concerns about these things. Your questions about these things, because I think concerns and questions are two different things. Concerns is you're a planning commissioner, you're part of this decision-making body, so in deliberations, you have an opportunity to say, I want to talk about this particular provision. I'm concerned about it. I've had some time to become familiar with what's being proposed. What we're trying to do is make sure that you have a
Understand the
good
change.
shot at
So we-
understanding.
I'm familiar with that's being.
So one thing I'd like to propose, because there is still a lot of red here, and Bill's gone through it, Jason's gone through it, I've looked at it. Instead of going over each red line, why don't you say, okay, page 3, does anybody have any questions about our red lines?
I will admit this, I have so sidetracked.
what are we talking about? On
This one.
this one here?
That's what we're talking
I
about.
didn't get all the way through.
It's okay, we're not
Yes.
planning to get all the way through it. The plan was to get partway through this one.
Okay,
But if we don't have questions about a page, let's not go over it. Is what I'm saying. So you can say,
Okay.
does anybody have any questions on page 3?
Okay, well, let's jump in. The first few pages, I think, are low hanging fruit. This is totally structural. It is how the table of contents changes. So it's kind of more of the same with that kind of comprehensive plan thing where it's like, that there's no change to regulation here. It's a table of contents, so it's a reflection of the content in the document. And this is just showing that there will be changes to how the organization is. So we want to talk about these individual things.
okay.
Okay, we'll be on that one.
So now we're down to Article 9.1.
So now we're down to, yep, that's right. So
Okay.
page 9 is what I'm looking at,
All right,
where we look at essentially introducing the downtown master plan and regulating plan.
the question I have is on look at 9.107 administration, and there's like final plat signature specified in section 9.237. In order to find out what that really means, we have to go to 9.237 to see what that actually says.
We don't have that page because it wasn't the proposed change.
I'm looking at section 9.107, which is
I didn't
administration.
include that in these pages because it doesn't have a change, but if others have a copy where they.
But it does have highlighted green, which is code references for.
This page here has some green on it.
Okay, so sorry, I could clarify, green means code references. Are highlighted in our document because when everything lands. We have to make sure that those code references are internally
Okay.
consistent,
All right.
so they're not
Changing anything,
substantive,
You're just tagging.
we're just tagging, we're just trying to.
So the
Make
first
sure we
red
go
we
back.
have is in section 9.109.
Can I stop real quick there, Bill?
Oh, I'm
You
sorry.
had us on that page. I have a note here. We have the old city hall address still on.
On what page?
This is under section 9.107 administration.
Yeah, that's B.
5.
Right, that's what we don't have in this package.
Okay, I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, we should have the.
I noted that when I was reading through here several times, so it's 9.107 B. Item 5. And then again. On 9.203. A.
That one is.
Okay, so we can word. search
And that one
these.
is in there. Yeah, we can probably correct those so that when people are going, oh, hey, look at these guys.
That's great. And that's something, just an objective update. right?
Yep.
We definitely feel that. All right, 9109, you said? Bill?
Yeah, well, we're seeing some red on that one.
And that's actually taking out the section 9.190 definitions and moving them to the.
Right, it's deferred until later, it says.
Yep.
And then below there is some changes in the law. And,
Yeah, so changes to, okay, so these are kind of these are disclaimers that are pretty typical to development codes that just sort of provide a more more legal strength to the city around a number of things. So for example, the first one is about, look at, if we reference something in here and Oregon law changes in the interim, this is essentially saying that laws that apply across the state are obviously not something that our code, not being up to date, can overcome. So this is just a flag to applicants to say, hey, we've done our best to keep up with state law, but if you see something in here where we've permitted something that's against state law, the state law is going to prevail. The other disclaimer is a similar thing. If you showed up to a pre-application meeting and we forgot to mention something, or even if we misstated something, that's on the city. That's not good practice. It's not a good idea, but it doesn't grant a developer the right to do something against that provision. Does that make sense? So it's a disclaimer that's put in there to cover the city's bases.
okay.
Yeah.
It's a legal thing.
Yep. So the next table is, these are the types. This is essentially taking the types. So what you're going to see actually in the next 1, 2,
Which is, this would be 9.205. Record file. And it's got a whole bunch of stuff here.
yeah, you're talking about the pages that we've got here? Yeah, okay.
I might have it.
So we stop at 2 of 3 and jump into the type.
Okay, there we go. Section 9.206. Application type process.
That's kind of all the types.
So types, we can talk about types. What we ended up doing with types is not necessarily a prescriptive thing. Types is an organizational concept. So types says in some codes, you'd see it less and less, but in some codes they would say zone change, here's your procedure. Conditional use permit, here's your procedure. Modification, procedure, blah, blah, blah. You see the point. What types do is it's just a organizational concept to provide a little more transparency on this idea that you have it. The table is a great way to summarize the benefit. It says, okay, I am a property owner in Lowell, or I'm a planning commissioner in Lowell. I'm now familiar with the types, what procedures are associated with the types, and now applications are just organized by types.
Well, I have a question about number 3. If you look at that, it says final decision. A type 1 decision is final decision of the city. It cannot be appealed to a planning commission or city council.
Are you on 16?
Can it be arbitrated, or, you know, I mean, that looks like pretty final stuff there.
You're talking about 3 on 9.
Yeah,
9.206.
9.206, number 3.
A3. I actually put a question mark on that myself.
A3, 9.206, a final decision, a type 1 decision is the final decision of the city. It cannot be appealed to the planning commission or city council. So a type 1, so the way that the types work are it's discretion. So type 4, type 5 is going to be the ultimate in discretion. These are things like what we're doing right now. And nobody makes a decision outside of this without public process, without planning commission hearing it, without the city council hearing it, because they're highly discretionary, meaning their interpretation of policy, their development of policy. A type 1 application on the other side of the spectrum is going to be like a fence permit, which is going to be quantitative. It's going to be, is it 6 feet high, or is it 7 feet high, or is it 5 feet high? So the discretion is gone. That the concept with the type 1 is that you're looking at, so let's look at the examples of type 1.
Building permits.
The building
Sign
permit
permits.
is going to be something that is from the city's perspective, is going to involve objective standards. It's gonna be yes, nos, thresholds, super quantitative, home occupation inside boundaries of the regulating plan. So the reason why that's type 1 is because the downtown master plan has established a form-based code, which means the concept is to be form-based, not use-based. So type 1 would mean the staff would provide an assessment of its appropriateness based on its form, right? That's the idea. Modification to an approval minor would be type 1 because by its nature it would be quantitative. Are you modifying? There's going to be quantitative criteria that allow staff. Another way to think about it is that if it came before planning commission, you'd say, well, why didn't you just assess whether?
That's not what we do. Go see him.
What's that?
We said, it's not what we do.
Right, you would
Go see
say,
him.
we would say, wow, I'm missing the game so that I can stamp.
It's the things we already said, this is the way it's gonna be. And then say, Jeremy, if somebody comes in and asks you for a sign permit, as long as it meets the standard, you can approve it. It doesn't have to come to us to say, yes, your sign is approved.
Or this is already an approved subdivision. Somebody wants to build a house in the approved subdivision within this code. Jeremy can say, yeah, we can process that permit.
So final subdivision, this is one that we get questions about pretty regularly. The tentative subdivisions where all the discretionary stuff happens. That's where all of the evaluations of the conditions of approval, the requirements. The final subdivision is therefore a non-discretionary process because it's just somebody saying, did they do it? Did they not do it? Did they do it? Did they not do it? And so that's the nature of type 1 and the higher types. And then the kind of type 2 and 3 become an exercise in, well, what do we want to do? And that's where you always have an appealable process. So the type 2 would be the manager establishes a decision, but it's appealable to the commission. Type 3 is the commission establishes a decision, but it's appealable to the council.
So just a quick reference on that one. So one of the ones type 2 is code interpretation. So somebody comes up to Jeremy and says, hey, Jeremy, this is how I interpret the code. Jeremy says, well, this is how I interpret the code. Then if there's issues there, then it comes to us as a type 2 type of administrative thing. Then we sit down and figure out, okay, what does it say?
Okay.
So
It just.
9.206. A, line 3 references type 1s, which are in the table, identified in the table. Just before. On. These 2 sheets, which are. Table 1 summary of approvals and types.
Yep.
All of these type 1s are identified in that table, 3 sheets or 4 sheets ahead, 1, 2. 3, 4,
Yeah.
4 pages ahead.
Type 1 to 2 and type 3.
Yep. And
So another important point about the way that the types were set up here was that the original process, so there's this huge section of red here, which is the new home of the types procedure. And then you see lots of other sections that are struck throughout the rest of the code. Is that with all the places where that function was being addressed? Freaking out the owl here. That function was being addressed haphazardly, not haphazardly, but very within each section, we essentially pulled those sections out, tucked them all into this type. So you have one place where you go for procedure, right? It describes what the types are procedurally, how they're appealed, who makes the decisions, how they're noticed. And so every other reference in the code, we'll see those as we go through, and I pointed to them in here, where it's just like, here's some examples of where you'll see how those, but we'll see them as we go through this, so it's like, yeah. Pretty much anytime you see an addition or a removal of a process related thing, it's just us taking the process that was smattered throughout the code and sticking it into one section, and that's essentially the types update.
Awesome.
So next page. In the same section.
So-
92.06,
Yep, so we can go through these.
92.06. Section. B. 3, notice of application for type 2 administrative decision.
What's your page number on the bottom?
There is no page number here. You see,
I think it's one, number 3, notice of application for type 2.
Yep.
And
we get down to number 4.
Any governmental agency?
Yep.
Okay.
City may notify other affected agencies. The city shall notify the rail authority and the rail line authority.
When there is a proposed development flooding or affecting their transportation facility.
Where do we have a rail line or a rail authority that has any jurisdiction in our town?
I think it was abandoned, hasn't it? I think it was just encompassed because that's just making sure we cover all bases.
Okay.
I think
If
that's
somebody proposes to
that's-
bring a rail line in,
Well, no, it's because it's transportation facility, rail line. It all comes back to transportation.
We could remove rail line authority.
Yeah, I think that's
Absolutely.
how I saw it, that it was just a cover line.
I was assuming that was it, why include extra?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an extra box you have to check. If we don't have that in there, then you want to check the box.
Are we?
And
Well,
that's
just are
not,
we
this
100%
is,
certain it's not relevant? Because I know there's historic stuff that passes through here.
well, and that's just a clarification question I'm asking, because obviously we're not striking anything in this meeting. I'm just trying to understand why that would be in there.
Yeah.
Because to me, it's an extra box we have to check.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably gonna be some degree of things like the bad address for City Hall, where it's like,
Well, and
sketch that, you know.
And in reality, this was started 2 years ago, that was the address.
Yes.
That's right.
So. It's just, that was a question I had
Yeah,
on,
yeah, that's a good question.
and mind you, I was doing a lot of this. After 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, when I had time to do this.
Wow.
And, like I said earlier, before we came to this, that's the whole reason for doing this, because we all catch different things. Like I said, I interpret it as, it's just a CYA, if we're down the road, that's how I interpret it. You take that as why is it in there? That's a good reason for the work group, get clarification on that, so we can decide whether or not we want that change at our actual meeting.
So the rest of the procedures, quasi judicial and notices and the process, I don't have questions on any of that. I don't know if Bill does.
No, the only thing I was a little nervous about is it looked like really a final decision by the city administrator and the planning commission and the city, and there was no place to go as a developer, and I'm thinking, damn, that's scaring a lot of people away.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad you brought that up, because I had a question on it too. So like, is this only for type 1s? I mean, it's listed in type 1s, but so thank you. I have the same question.
Yeah, it's the purpose is not to, and I will, in Jeremy's defense, he was very skeptical about any type 1. He was pushing back on any sort of like, well, look, let's make sure that this is being
The
properly
whole
done.
idea in my mind is, in order for the town to expand, you can't be, I'm serious when I even explained it. I hired a surveyor who said, oh God, not Lowell. because he had heard that Lowell was a really hard place to work. And his experience was as sweet as it could have been. And he said, I'll be damned. All the information I heard was wrong. And only one person has to tell one other person who tells 7 other people who tell 7 other, it just goes. And so if we get too huffy here, maybe that's the wrong word.
The purpose is not to get huffy, for sure.
I think it's just the opposite, taking out, instead of a building permit coming to us, because now the person has to take time. They gotta come to a formal hearing. For us to talk about a building permit, that can be handled by Jeremy,
Right.
and that's kind of what that type 1 is all about, is taking those things, so it does make it easier on the builders. And some of these things not to have to come to a planning commission meeting.
That's great as far as I'm concerned, but we need to make sure that he has some leeway. That, there's some of the stuff in here that.
Right.
As to what house design, and I read through here and I'm just going.
So the biggest critique that most communities hear is. I haven't done as much planning for Lowell as Henry has done. But the biggest critique you hear is. You just gotta make it predictable. You have to make it objective, meaning if I'm gonna lay out investment in this, can't have surprises. I have to have predictability, right? So the next thing in line would probably be, and then it'd be great if you had it teed up exactly the way I want it, but. What you've got to do is make it clear. You have to make it clear and objective. People aren't gonna come and bring investment if they think there's a chance it's gonna explode. At the final hearing, because there's ambiguity. So a lot of what this is doing, the types is a good example of that. Let's standardize the process. Here, this is the
That makes sense.
process.
That makes
This is
sense.
the process you're going to follow. This is the criteria that this planning commission will have to speak to. And if they deny it, they'll have to show why it doesn't meet said
Right.
criteria. So sometimes it just looks like more hoops to jump through, but the aim was definitely to create. Like the form-based code in downtown is about making it much more simple, much more straightforward. So that someone can say, yeah, I can get behind that because I'm not fearing too many strangers hiding around the corners with criteria that I don't understand. Jason, you had a.
So I was gonna point out additional to what Bill said. With the permits and everything that's I've come to Lowell and taken over at the school. The city of Lowell has been fabulous to work with. The only thing that concerns me is the timelines, and when I'm reading through here, and I was actually trying to find my notes where. Yeah, it says 30 days from here, and then 120 days from here, and 30 days, I'm going, holy cow. Well, I'm going through that same permit issue right now. At the school with the building that I need to have operational before school starts next year. And we're going through 3 months of review in order to hit that timeline. And design took some time, getting to where we're at right now has taken quite a bit of time to get us there. I don't want to hamstring developers that are coming in and saying, hey, I want to come in here, but when I'm looking at, oh, it's going to be 6 months before I can put a shovel in the ground. I don't want to, is all of those timelines, is that state or federal law?
Yeah, let me explain, because there's nuance to what you're describing. So they are. I would say that the 120 days was established as an advocacy of developers. So they're right, so these timeframes are shot clocks for the city. And they may sound immediately like, well, that's way too much time, but a lot of communities are working under duress when it comes to applications, right? So the communities that I work with a lot are just constantly that 120 days, and that's sort of it's just a principle. So you have 30 days to establish completeness, right? 30 days, you have to let that applicant know whether you think the application is complete or not. That doesn't mean you can't do it in 10 days. 15 days or 20. So it's not like you have to wait 30 days. You have to do it in at least 30 days. 120 is the same thing, meaning And we've had applications where it's like, this seems pretty straightforward, let's get it on the next planning commission. We can pull this off in 30 days. That gives us enough time to know this, so, you know. Has to be done by 120 days. So really, those are established, they are state. Their state law. The 120-day rule is standard throughout the state, but it's really an advocacy component for developers to say, you can't make someone wait longer than X. I don't think the city of Lowell bumps up against 120 days very much. I don't know, Jeremy, if you have a touch point on that. Henry would, I think they turn them around pretty quick.
Yeah.
So they don't ride that edge.
Right, I just wanted to make sure that we're not, you know, making it, we're putting it in on
No, we're not introducing something.
development code that we're saying, well, you know, we're gonna give you a permit in 6 months.
Nope. We're saying we will be forced to give you a permit in 6 months, hopefully a lot sooner.
So that doesn't stretch out to 180 days.
Right, I'm just,
I understand, I understand what you're saying, is we're gonna make it you're gonna wait 120 days before you get a permit. But like you saying, it's a city, you have to do this amount of time, you have no choice.
It would be completely unprecedented in my experience too, and I don't know if it'd be legal. But it'd be unprecedented for a city to say, we'll do you one better state, our code is gonna say 90 days. I think that would be unwise, because of the situations where you could
get
bump up against.
20 permits all at once and have to review them all in process.
And have like a messy kind of application process where you really need time to figure it out. So.
And that comes back to us being forced to make a decision when we don't have all the correct information.
So that's types in a nutshell. I think at this point, you've got a good sense for what the types are. It's a big chunk of red in this document. Again, it also is related to quite a few other sections of red that you'll see. The next fairly significant thing that comes up is lot consolidation, which is
9 to 11.
9 to 11, that's right. So property line adjustments is how it was written before. This is not uncommon. There are some jurisdictions that don't call out lot consolidation, but lot consolidation is a pretty discrete exercise. The county recorder views it as a pretty discrete thing, and so we proposed introducing lot consolidation. So property line adjustment would be that you just shift your line over, right? Move that property line somehow. The lot consolidation would be that you actually eliminate a property line. So you have two small properties together, you eliminate one of the property lines, obviously meeting all kinds of.
Make it a bigger lot.
And so it's a pretty discrete, different thing, and it's nice to have lot consolidation criteria because it's a pretty unique thing that you're doing, very different than just moving your property line. But there are a lot of codes that kind of assume lot consolidation as a type of property line adjustment, but it's very awkward to administer. And it's pretty vanilla lot consolidation language. I mean, obviously you're trying to meet some basic criteria around this, and you're not creating sort of unreasonable new parcels. You're not creating a new non-conformance by doing that.
So I do have that on 9.213.
Okay.
B. Number 3.
All affected properties will comply with the minimum lot depth, width, and area standards of the applicable zone after the proposed consolidation. So
The school district owns a few lots that won't even be feasible on because the depth of the lots in this pie shape down here in the on East Main Street. And I'm just using the school districts.
Yeah.
As an example, because I know that the depth of these lots won't.
are you talking about, you're not
Got
talking
this-
about
got
the
this guy here.
ones on the.
Those two.
Not necessarily the red one in there, Bill, but if you look at where my bus lot is right now
Oh, okay. All right.
and my bus barn, and where we're proposed to put the new
So this
weight
would-
room, classrooms. I'm just saying, it's probably the only spot in Lowell that if I
Right,
did that, but I
right.
just want to make sure that existing conditions are, you know, with.
Absolutely. I mean, with what you're talking about there is, and I think we mentioned this in the last meeting where one of the reasons that we were having trouble with the garage setback initially was this idea that we don't write code for the exceptions. I
Right,
think that's a little bit kind of the lowest common denominator kind of thing. It's like, well, there are means to address things like that that are exceptions.
Okay.
You have
I just want to make sure we don't make ourselves into a corner, and this would never, that I could think of, I shouldn't say it, but never. But my reference of the school properties, because couldn't imagine us ever doing anything with that little sliver over there, but if there's anything else
Nope, it's a good
in
example.
town that would hit.
It's a good example of an instance where the relevance of bumping up against the criteria becomes relevant. And so in some instances, there'll be a objective hardship.
Okay.
And in some instances, it'll be like, no, that's why we have the provision in the first place. Yours would be an example of a purpose where the hardship could clearly be described. So more about the consolidation, just it's essentially creating the administration detail around consolidation. So it's a lot of this again points back to the types. So that we're not duplicating all of these details, but we're pointing back to the place where we talk about process. On 40, I wanted to talk about, this is section 9.220, the subdivision of the partition tentative plan. This is a change. Lowell had a somewhat unique dynamic where subdivisions were processed by a type 4 process. What essentially is a type 4 process, meaning that the planning commission subdivision would come to planning commission would provide a recommendation to council. That's very unusual. And in the same spirit of this kind of, if you look at the structure of the types and the procedure, if somebody was unhappy with how their subdivision, if the planning commission had final approval on subdivision and an applicant was unhappy with it, or a neighbor was unhappy with it, they could appeal that to the council, right? So it's kind of right sizing these applications so that it's like the majority of those are probably gonna end with planning commission providing an approval. Final decision, things move on. Council's not bothered with things that aren't controversial, that aren't sort of at their level, right? They get elevated to their level when somebody appeals and says, this is wonky, I don't like at all how the planning commission did it. I don't like it so much that I'm pursuing an appeal. Then it goes to the council. So it was the code committee's opinion that subdivisions are a more appropriate type 3 review process, meaning they get noticed widely, planning commission has a hearing, planning commission provides a decision. That
Right.
decision can always be appealed to the council. Yep.
It's just no longer going to them for the final, yes.
It's no longer going to them as a matter of default, right? Which I think in most communities, they would say, yeah, we can't be looking at every subdivision. That's why we have a planning commission. Partitions would have the same review process. On page 44, so this is 9228B. B is introduced in substitution for C and D. C and D gets into a bit more detail than is really practical or necessary about anticipating future growth for a partition. So if you partition and you have a remnant lot, the new provision provides or requires that you provide what's called a shadow plat, which is just to provide some concept for how this remaining property could divide in the future. C and D resulted in something that had, I think, calculations that were sort of problematic. In my mind, this points to what you're talking about, Bill, where it's like a developer can do something that's a little bit more objective, straightforward to meet the criteria. Whereas C and D, we're getting to like, well, what do you mean exactly with 80% of the maximum? So that's what that provision is about. This is kind of streamlining the complexity of that requirement. 45, you'll see decision process. This is a perfect example of something that's been yanked out of here and stuck into the types section. So it's struck out to remove it from this point, and you find that exact information within the types structure earlier in the document. 46, we added some language about final. Just clarifying that the culminating action for a subdivision and a partition is a final subdivision and a final partition plat. I think the next page is really just about more of the kind of types reconciliation through the code.
I got a question on section 923-236, dedication requirements. And the one is D. And I read it several times and I'm not sure what it really says. It has a land divider shall provide a designated 1 foot reserve strips. What the hell is that?
What is a reserve strip? It's essentially, so finish the phrase there.
Across the ends of the stubbed street adjoining undivided land or along half streets adjoining undivided land. The reserve strip shall be included in the dedication granting to the city the right to control access over the reserve strip to assure the continuation or completion of the street. This reserve strip shall overlay the dedicated street right of way.
Yeah.
So
that's a street connectivity provision.
1 foot.
Yeah, the 1 foot, I'm trying to wrap my brain around. I mean, essentially what it's a placeholder of sorts to establish.
That's the sidewalk and the street and there's another, what is it, 3 feet for utilities to be in the ground on the north side of the sidewalk and the street. I know about, or I think I know about all that because I had to do it, but this 1 foot thing, I stumbled on that one. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, it shouldn't be thought of as a the reserve strips come into play when you have a property that develops, typically partitions. You're not at the level typically of having public dedications, but when you get into a subdivision, if you have a new subdivision, you think about how neighborhoods are, you're going to have, obviously it's going to be really problematic if every subdivision is a cul-de-sac or every subdivision is a limit.
Yeah.
So your reserve strip ends up becoming the way that you have preserved the extension of that access. So it's not a right of way in the sense that you're going to be using it.
So if the access is 3 feet, then you make it 4 feet? Is that what you're saying? For the utilities?
Maybe we're right here.
So I want to
sorry.
spend time on this because I could also follow up with something more in detail, and our time is sort of the essence. But if you had let's say this is a property line right here. This is a vacant lot. This is the new proposed subdivision, so it's got all these lots here, lots here, lots here. Your reserve strip is going to be this 1 foot area that essentially identifies this as a place where future connectivity happens. So I think of them as sort of placeholders. It's not like this is independently going to accomplish much, except that you've provided this.
That's the street, right?
This is the street, yep, this is the
Oh,
right of
okay,
way.
so it's not on the edge of the
property, it's in the end of the street.
That's right, it's on the dedication.
Yeah,
It's on the dedication that the developers have to they're gonna dedicate this street to the city in most cases. And the reserve strip becomes, and usually there's other conditions about, you're gonna put up a barricade or something here, you're gonna. Ensure that when this property.
Builds out.
that's-
Okay, I got it. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So. Another one that I'm gonna call out some of these key ones, just looking at our time here. One of the ones, and so let me know if I pass something you're particularly interested in. Major and minor changes. So Lowell up to this point did not have a distinction. If someone came in and they had an approved subdivision or an approved partition or any approved land division. And they came and said, we've looked at that, we discovered something, we have to rearrange the configuration somehow. Lowell didn't have a provision, does not currently have a provision to account for the distinction between something fairly substantial versus something pretty minor. So something minor would be, we recalculated the square footage for a few lots so that we could introduce X. That would be, and then there's criteria about what the minor versus the major is. Major would be something, well, it doesn't meet the minor, but an example would be, we're adding a park. And the concept is, if you're making a big enough change, we need to look at this as essentially a re-application. We need to notice it again. We need to let neighbors know what is happening here because it's substantial. If, however, it's a minor change, then the city administrator, and once again, in the spirit of accommodating the fact that things change a little at times, the city administrator can then approve a minor change.
I think that's good. No problem with
So the next one is site plan review. Site plan review is something that's in place already, type 3. So this would mean the planning commission, these would come before you and the planning commission. The distinction here is that site plan reviews that happen in the downtown area because of its form-based code, because of its very prescriptive requirements. And again, trying to promote the benefits of the form-based code, which is again, a developer says, oh, they have a form-based code. What that means is if I just do what they said, I have a fast track, a streamline to get my project done. Type 2 would mean that you'd have a decision by staff appealable to the commission related to site plans in the downtown area. The rest of the city would be, because they don't have the same strict objective regulating structure, that site plan would come to the planning commission for review on certain developments that require site plan review. So it's really just adding the distinction that in the downtown site plan review does not come before the planning commission in the downtown. We introduced the building standard sheets here and the decision criteria for downtown.
Is that where
So,
on page
250
page
A.
51, 9250, actually B1.
925,
9250
yeah.
B.
Oh, I went past that.
So B is where we felt that the city administrator utilizes the regulating plan as the criteria.
I'm pretty sure I had a flag right here because it says sections XX. It doesn't refer to the sheets.
So it's placeholder, it's green, meaning
Right.
we've got to, when this lands, we've got to update that.
Okay, so, but right now we're saying that we've got these regulating plan that conforms to building standard sheets. So we're referencing the building standard sheets where we are at.
We would
And
reference,
this, guys, is probably about where I was doing this at my kitchen table, so.
Yeah,
didn't
so
find
it would be, so the reference that should be added there would be section 9414, section 9414, which is the 9423. It would be the sections where we, all that the building standards.
I saw that placeholder one other place too, but I didn't find the flags. Where it was placeholder to XX.
Yeah, a lot of those references, anytime we knew that there was a reference that would have some, like, it's very hard to do all that in real time. Right? So you're just flagging when all this lands, we need to ripple back through our references to make sure that they're all internally consistent. So this one was when it was formulated, it was like, we actually don't know what those are gonna be at this point.
So that is a 9.
9404, huh?
1-4.
9401.
So that's something that we would expect to have,
That would be Henry just
just to fix.
finishing.
Okay.
This is, yeah,
This is where we start
what
getting-
comes before the council would be a cleaned up document, but even then, you still have a process after adoption that is like, because it's very hard to do all this work and then find out that something's going to be very different, right? So it's the chicken egg thing where the council says, okay, we're ready, and then we go and do the work. We're waiting everything to be all.
So 9.414 is just the downtown residential detached.
So what you would line out here is the sections 9, it would be a serial list of all the sections that relate to downtown. So, comma,
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's gonna get down to the building standards, basically from 9.4.
yep, 9423. And those will be updated. I think those numbers look like they're in need of updating on the actual building standard sheets.
Okay.
And so the big one is D here, right? 9408 D, I think that's it. Development standards,
Oh, yeah.
we've talked about that already, so. And this is the one that says, minimum lot area is 5,500 from southern. And that is,
Okay, so you jumped ahead there.
9408 D, I think it is, ABC. Oh, got that wrong.
Yeah. It's not there.
I might have flipped the wrong page here. Maybe it's 9404.
So let's do a process check to see how we're up to, so if we look at flood hazard, so this would be a good point to stop doing the page to page, because the way that I organize this is that as we get into certain topics, it'd be better to just address collectively, so in our next meeting. So at this point, what I'd like to do is look at 129, so the flood hazard language, so let's look real quick here. This is gonna be section, for those of you looking at section, this is gonna be section 9620, so we're jumping ahead quite a ways. But this is gonna be a lot of red to address and just be done with. So section 9620, I have it as page 129.
Coming in on it here,
So we're leaving off at the end of
9622,
Yep, we're gonna leave it
9620, got it.
at the reference to site plan review. So site plan review is the last one that we called out here.
This is a flood hazard.
Yep.
Development.
This is a process, and this one constitutes a hefty chunk of this document. So it is about 20+ pages. And it is just like, it's akin to the Parks Master Plan, it's akin to the manufactured home state law. This is a process that occurred independently about a year ago, I think.
Yeah, it's about a year ago.
About a year ago, this was undertaken by, the city to be in alignment with FEMA's new, essentially flood insurance standard. So if you're gonna be a community that's gonna be on the National Flood Insurance Program, you have to institute these. So Henry worked with Jeremy and with the city to develop the code language. This was 100% independently developed. It's been adopted. This was its opportunity to integrate into the code. So this is a big chunk of red that you see here related to flood hazard, which is really not up for discussion in our passage. It is outside of the scope of this particular period. So it was one that I thought we might, among others, where we might feel good that we check that box as far as the planning.
So what you're saying is this has already been adopted or even done, all we're doing is.
All we're doing
It
is
needs to
Split
be
it into
codified.
the-
It was adopted as a standalone ordinance and we need to codify it.
we just added it to the land development.
Furthermore, we are complying with federal.
That is correct. They required us to do this. If we wanted to be in the National Flood Insurance Program, we had no discretion.
How does it affect our town as far as, a developer coming in? And we can tell him what is in the floodplain and what is not in the floodplain and where this flood hazard business could take effect?
Yeah, the first step, somebody turns in a building application. I have to check if it's in the designated floodplain. If it is, then they have to get a flood permit. And that requires certain steps.
Okay, and that's talked about in here?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah, so the other thing that it does with all that red is strikes the old code.
and this is probably something they run into in every city that they try to build in. So this isn't.
Yeah.
This isn't our own deal.
Oak Ridge had to do the same thing. I think there was a few other cities in Wayne County that did the same thing.
So let's look at 170, which is going to be section 9710. This was another one of these, not related to our project, but a process that was mandated by state law and was folded into this sort of drafting on the momentum of this development code update. House Bill 4064.
Which you said 9.7.
So 9.710. Yeah, page 170 on it.
9710,
9710. Yes.
okay.
So what you're gonna see is a bunch of, I don't know exactly where we highlighted it in yellow, but it's all struck. So this is the cities, and cities across the state are required to do exactly this. Remove the standards that they have related to manufactured dwellings that are unique to manufactured dwellings, meaning if you have a stick-built home, you can do X, but if you have a manufactured home, you have to do Y. So there's a very little bit of this code that remains. And most of it is essentially just pivoting manufactured home uses into the same standards that are applicable to single family homes. So it's really just striking the distinction. So it's,
Do we have any land in Lowell that would accept or be able to have a mobile home park built on it?
yeah, technically speaking. We have a lot of vacant land.
Flat land?
No, not a lot of flat land. So probably not a lot of incentive to do that type of development. So it's a pretty sweeping and I'd say specific measure that is part of the state's push for housing accommodation to say, you know, we've got to be more careful about
It has,
creating obstacles to housing for.
one of the things that's nice about a mobile home park is it is less expensive, so people that don't have the right means or are retired and on fixed incomes can actually live in a place that's warm. Building a stick-built house, it's awfully nice, but it's awfully expensive. You know, a lot of people just really can't afford it. That's why this probably is more important than we think, but and looking around Lowell, I can't visualize in my mind a good place for a manufactured home park.
Our process, so it's not necessarily about explicitly promoting them, right? It's about making sure that you're not providing them with
Excluding them.
exclusive, restrictions. So our effort did not include sort of an analysis to see where we would. I don't think there's anything in the code updates that LCOG was tasked with and the code committee, PMT, that is about explicitly promoting manufactured home parks.
Got two more XX
In there.
notices for you here. It's the table 1 in section 9708, carbon cluster standards.
And the table XX and the
The development standards.
There's quite a few of them there. There's a few more.
And then there's another one right past it, and 2 pages further back. 9.708. Table 1.
So the most concerning thing that you would bump into is one of those that wasn't highlighted in green. That
Okay.
green is gonna have a review that's very discreet. There'll be literally a process to go through here. Only the green
Right,
stuff,
but we're gonna wanna know what that,
what that section is.
yep. I mean, I'm gonna wanna know what it is.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good point.
And then on section 97.08. Looks like 3E3.
Carport.
Yep.
Yeah, so definitions, you're gonna find all the definitions at the end of the document now. We took all those and threw them in the back.
Yeah. Well, and there's another one on that. Family child care home standards. Oh, no, there isn't. Couldn't read that. It's a 9.019.
Thank you.
And you said those are all things that. Gonna be covered.
Yeah, we'll fix them, but to Jason's point, it'd be nice if he knew what section number referred to.
Right, I'm gonna be asked to, you know, vote on this. I wanna know.
Yeah.
What I'm voting on.
Yep.
I don't,
Wherever
I
there's.
truly don't feel like anything malicious is put in here. It's not what you guys were hired to do, but I do wanna understand.
Okay, so we actually made it through the content that we had planned to get through. So that's a pat on the back is. So what we did is we went through this first table here. And well, we went through the table, but more importantly, we went through the content. So it was our January 18th content. So when we meet next time, I'm creating an identical table that will be, so what we're gonna do, just to whet your appetite, is because I felt that these would be better to just discuss. It's actually less content, but we're gonna talk about the building standard sheets. We're going to talk about accessory dwelling units. We're gonna talk about cottage clusters. So it's a lot of the kind of meatier. Provision related content that's being introduced, particularly in downtown, but also beyond. And so that's what our next meeting is gonna be. So I think what we did here was kind of a breadth thing to get through some of the stuff. It's like, look, this has already been adopted. We got it into a few substantive things, but next time we have less content, but it probably has a little bit more orientation. Yeah. So thank you. It's not lost on me at all that Bill is spending his time at the coast reading through the code. Jason's spending his time late at night reading through the code. This is a big ask. You know, we call ourselves public servants. I think we are, but public servants are those who really volunteer that time for their community. So thank you for taking a look. I hope you have, in some instances, a better understanding for the content. And that you're able, ultimately, when the hearing reconvenes, to feel just that much more confident to speak to your concerns about it.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.
So we can understand.
No, I think it's a smart decision by the
And I'm not
city.
trying to be argumentative on things. I do want to understand it. There are some exceptions that I see that I might not agree with right now, but we'll see where we end up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what a commission should do, is bring their perspective. So,
Can I ask you a question?
sure.
Can I ask him a question? Sure. Well, I would, you know, I went to the library the other day and read through the whole book. And,
Yeah, then we did.
I did it in about 4 hours ago. And I saw the same thing happen tonight that happened to me, and that's that referencing, getting to the reference that somebody's talking about was very, very hard. Is there any way you can put a bigger header up on each page that says what's on that page? You know, like section 9 point so-and-so to A to 9 point so-and-so C, you know, that's what that's on that page, so that when you go to reference something, you can see.
Do you mean this page?
I'm talking about every page.
Oh.
Please.
Header references.
Oh, you mean so that, like a header that would orient you immediately when you look at it, what section you're at?
Right, and then you
Yeah,
say, okay, I gotta go forward, I need to,
Yeah,
especially when you start doing the code
yeah,
numbers.
that's,
Yeah, you
That's
get into a
just-
section where you got 9.7.
So confusing.
9.70.
I think most codes have that. Most codes have that, and maybe,
Why didn't I understand why this one did?
yeah, I think it's in the draft. It's the same reason why there's green splotches and stuff.
Okay.
It's a good
okay.
point, though. I think you're absolutely right. When I'm looking at stuff.
Yeah, I would go and I couldn't tell whether I was supposed to go forward or backward, and I saw that a couple of times here.
That's an excellent, that's excellent.
It's a very valid point.
Okay, I think that's a wrap as far as the content.
All right, you all covered a lot of ground tonight. Great job.
The big one will be next.
Somehow I got two marked up.
They gave us another one today, so you gave
Oh,
us.
you got another
The
one?
ones that we all printed out, then they gave us, which one's the last one?
I'm gonna go trade all these in. I got a lot of tin. Make a little money here, I think.
So the distinction for they're not perfectly redundant, that particularly the comp plan, the value add with that, the comp plan, if you look at the original copy of the comp plan. Side to side, you see one of these would be pretty juicy, so Bill hold that up, the comp plan from before.
I think this is it right here.
No,
It's right at least
This, from here down.
not that one, then it goes.
there you go. So what I did is I took that and I turned it into this, which was, let's just look
Okay,
at the
that's
change.
this guy here.
That's the old
Now
one,
that
that's
one.
the new one. And it wasn't quite as dramatic in the development code because it's so marked up, but there's about 50 fewer pages in it. So that we would just turn the page, have another section. that was-
So we're only looking at.
Great. We're understanding the red. The problem is I'm reading all of them. And then I start having questions on the black too.
Well, and I think it's important to just, I think that's important for us as a county commissioner to address. And other thing is that we need to look at, we need to be familiar with the entire comprehensive plan. If we see things that are not being addressed in this situation, we need to talk with the city about getting those addressed.
What I would like to is to get current numbers from the last 2020.
So I did look that up on my phone just because the census is super accessible. The number is So 2010 was 1,045 residents. And the 2020 is 1,169 residents.
1,100, what?
I might have rented that much to people
So about 120 new residents over 10 years.
in 10 years.
Pretty typical for a small city in Lane County at least.
Plus, we had some pretty major changes with water conservation back way before.
Well, yeah,
that's
that
really
first,
stopped our growth.
from 0 to 10. There was no houses built at all because we couldn't take care of it. Then the water situation got better, and so, and hey, we're open for business. And
I think
Then we exploded.
I just watched all those houses up there on Moss, as soon as they put the springs around on the lot, there was a sign on there, it sold. And it went pretty fast, and those are pretty hefty houses, and every one of
Is that
them,
the 80 homes?
yeah, and those,
Well, Hayden did 18 and the
They're all
rest of it, even the private ones sold down.
they're all 7,000-foot lots, but they look smaller than that. You know, I mean,
They're big homes too.
yeah.
Well, and how much development's been up on First Street, Center?
One of the other things too is the money probably is people that have made the money and they're ready to kind of retire, and they don't want to have a 2-story house. And to get any kind of money out of a lot, you need to build a 2-story house on it. And that's gonna accommodate a different type of people than maybe what we want out here. I don't know.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks.
So I brought it up in one meeting.
Old timer.
I know we're wrapping here, but we talk a lot in a lot of communities. I remember Coburg, the big thing for Coburg was if you want to keep your school, you're gonna have to figure out how you're gonna
Exactly.
accommodate families. The other thing that gets invoked often, and I get kind of this a lot of Yoncalla when we help them, was this idea that all these folks in Yoncalla who were unable to kind of maintain properties.
I'm sorry, say that?
Just folks in Yoncalla were unable to manage their property, right? It's like, I can't take care of this house, I can't go up and down the stairs, I wanna stay in the community I raised my family. But I have to go to Roseburg or I have to go to Eugene to find something like that, or maybe Cottage Grove. So the aging in place is another phenomenon, which is just like providing options for people to downsize, stay in the community where they've spent their lives. So it's another side of that, just kind of catch the bookends, right? Kind of younger families and the folk down.
Well, we need everything here. You know, we do.
All right, are we ready to adjourn?
And on that-
So, ready to adjourn with a reminder that next meeting will be on the 25th, next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Same time, 6 o'clock. And then at that point, that's the only other date we have set right now. So based on how things go that night determines whether we.
Well, I have to say, I wish we could have had the meeting last week, so we could have an idea what. You know, just to give us some outline of what to read. You and I spent hours and just trying to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to be looking at, and.
I'm trying to lay it out as far as guiding you through and giving you some helps, so.
Well, then I don't think I had that.
Jake sent that.
It's 2 days after our last meeting.
so-
Yeah, he sent that on the 5th.
Right after the last meeting, which I know, I
Maybe
sent
it was
to
a
the
day
planning
after our
commission.
last meeting.
Oh, okay.
He emailed it.
I'll check with everybody to make sure you have it.
Yeah,
Do you have a reading list for
Next week, next week, work session.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I want to go ahead and stop recording at 8:03 p.m.